Session Blood.
Alright, welcome back everyone to Session Blood episode 26. And I think today we're going to talk a little bit about the recent Blitz tournament that happened at Auckland.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely some interesting results there.
Yeah, there was a huge Blitz event at Mighty Ape, which was sold out quite quickly. There was 48 people signed up. The organizer decided it was fine to increase it to 54. So we had 54 people turn up, which was pretty good for a Blitz event. And yeah, it really kind of sets the stage for the calling, which of course is Blitz as well. So we're definitely keen to talk about pretty much break it down and see what we can expect to see at the calling from that.
Yeah, what influence it might have on the meta, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the focus of today's episode. Before we get into that, we're just going to go through a couple of community shout-outs, like we always love doing. So my first shout-out is to Gavin Wu. So Gavin was actually the winner of that tournament on the weekend playing Kano. And I thought a huge congrats to him. Like, Kano is definitely not the easiest deck to play, although it is very strong in Blitz. And he managed to navigate the field there, I think winning a few Wizard Mirrors along the way in the top 8. Mm-hmm. So, well done. Good to see new people winning tournaments. I love it.
Yeah, and what a great prize for a Wizard, you know, and first edition Arcane Rising box.
Very on theme. Very on theme.
Yes. So that was really good to see.
Arcane Rising.
Yeah, and my shout out goes to Maximilian Zart, who reached out to me on Discord and talked a little bit about his LGS community and the growing community, you know, where he's from. And yeah, basically cheers for reaching out, and massive shout out to you for kind of pushing the game to other players as well.
Yeah, it's always good to see. That's what we love.
Yeah.
And we also had one more. We actually got a little package from someone down here in New Zealand.
Yeah, Jared
Boyd.
From Dunedin.
Yeah, from Dunedin. So that was really cool. So he actually sent us these hero altars. I might just walk up to the camera to show them a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully you can get, if you tilt it, maybe you can see the kind of the 3D effect that he's managed to create, which was really cool. And you know, big shout out to you. Thank you for you know, giving us these some when Classic Constructed is back on the menu. I'm definitely going to be busting one of these. Yeah, so big shout out to you.
Yeah, Karol the Brute Master, and maybe I'll have to take up Guardian and see what I can do. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, and talking about the competition we did on the previous episode, the giveaway, we had a lot of great messages, you know, people really excited to see the worlds, you know, talking about what Monarch might show, and basically everyone is just really keen to see this game grow as much as possible.
Yeah, I was really heartened to see comments about the things people are looking forward to, things like, you know, being able to build up their local communities and play in person and play more tournaments and things like that. So we had so many good comments. It was actually quite hard to choose from, but we did have one we thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, so I decided to go for the one that I felt really kind of shine with creativity and something that we might see in Monarch, and that was Jakub Siedlecki, and I believe it's a Polish player, who said, basically talking about Monarch and seeing an alternative win condition, you know, stacking gold, silver, and copper coins and becoming a Monarch. So, you know, giving you that alternate win condition, then getting your opponent down to 0, which is kind of really on theme with Monarch. So definitely check out the full comment if you're interested. It was really cool to see. But yeah, congrats on winning our giveaway.
Yeah, so like I mentioned last time, we'll be sending you out this Crucible of War playmat, and also one of these hats, and some unlimited Welcome to Wraith boosters. So congratulations.
Yeah, congrats. We'll grab your details and get in touch with you to organize that.
Alright, so now we'll just kick off and have a chat about the Blitz tournament that happened and how that's going to, I think, influence the meta going forward, and maybe a few things we can learn from it.
Yeah.
But before we jump into that, I know that, unfortunately, I wasn't able to play on the weekend, but Karol here, I know you played something a little bit different, a little bit spicy.
Yeah. So I ended up playing Shiyana, for those who didn't know, which was quite a funny way that I actually ended up playing that list, because I didn't
spin the tail.
Yeah, what happened is, a couple of days before, or even a week before, I tried to buy a ticket. I saw they were selling out. I went to the website, and it was all sold out. And I thought to myself, damn it, I missed out. So I posted a comment on the Facebook page being like, please, if anyone knows anyone selling a ticket or anything, do get in touch. Or if there's any way for me to play, definitely let me know. And Alan, one of the people working for LSS, actually, he was going to play in the tournament, but he was feeling quite unwell as well. And he reached out to me and he was like, hey, you could take my spot. But
there's a catch.
Yeah, you can take the spot, but I really... I do, it would be good to see you play the list that I was going to run. And I was, very intrigued, he was like, it's not your typical list, but it was made by Jason Chung, one of the developers. So I thought to myself, wow, Jason created this, meta-breaking list that I get to try out on this tournament and really challenge all the Iras and Kanos that were going to turn up. So I thought to myself, wow, this is a great opportunity.
He's been given a gift.
Yeah, but and of course the list turned out to be Shiyana, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I felt a little bit skeptical. But I decided to, I was like, Alan, I'm going to play that Shiyana list. I'm going to do my best and see how we go. Maybe it is going to break the meta, maybe I can defeat all these Kanos and Iras. So, of course, my biggest concern was that I didn't have any practice with the list. I really just kind of had a look at it the night before and thought to myself, okay, Alan's going to put it together. Jason's a great player. He probably made something pretty good. But I did have those concerns that I wouldn't be able to know how to play it. So I thought, okay, I'll just ask Jason on the day. And turn up on the day. I turned up early to kind of, hopefully get my head around the list, the deck that Jason put together. And I asked him, Jason, you've probably built some sick powerhouse. What do I do?
A finely tuned machine.
Yeah. And the list was basically a very aggressive, a bunch of aggressive generics. So it was a very aggro-based Shiyana. You ran the Red Rebels, Red Scars, Nimbleisms, Nimble Strikes, basically all you can think of.
Like Coax and Commotion, that kind of thing?
Yeah, Coax and Commotion. So I am going to be writing an article about the list and putting it on Channel Fireball. So if you want to have a deeper look, you can definitely check that out. But basically it was just, very aggressive, Command and Conquers and Light and Strikes. Basically put on as much pressure as you can, and then you have the Art of Wars to create a really big turns, but you have Lessons in Lava and Teklo cores and access to all these specialization cards that you kind of want to distract your opponent, to make them think you're just an aggressive deck, get them low on life, and then shoot them with a Lesson in Lava. Hopefully unblockable, and deal a ton of damage.
It's funny because one slight downside of that strategy is when you're playing against a deck like Kano, they've got that built-in Arcane Barrier 3 from the meta covers and the Storm Striders, so it's harder to sort of burn that through. But yeah, against other players it's quite cool because you have things like Arknight Shard as well, which is specialization, and like Karol mentioned, Lesson in Lavas. And if your opponent's not playing Arcane Barrier, which they might not, just sort of from nowhere you're like, all right, burn you for 3, game over.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, Jason, please tell me, is there anything I should know about the list? Is there anything kind of you thought out against all these super powerful decks? And he said, I'll tell you after the first round. And I was like, okay. All right, okay, so it's a challenge. I need to win the first round, and then I'll get all this information and be really prepped. And I thought, I'm going to pilot this monster to perfection. And I did manage to win the first round, actually. I was versing a Guardian, and I just managed to put enough pressure on him to not swing back at me with, his powerful Dominate. attacks. And yeah, I just got there with we were both really low life, and then the Arcanite Shard just managed to ping him for the 1 damage that I needed to win. So I was just like, yes, my first win. Jason's going to explain the deck to me now. And he basically like, I'm not going to explain the deck to you. I just basically needed to go to the bathroom. And then when I was there, I just came up with the list and wrote it down and gave it to Alan to play. And I was just like, oh man, this is not a meta breaking deck. I'm screwed,
Like, abort.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it was definitely a ton of fun. Basically doing turns like plunder run from Arsenal into a Scar for a Scar into Enlightened Strike. It could basically do insane amount of damage backed up with cards like Art of War, Razor Reflex, basically all the kind of like aggressive generics you might think of, and then do something like 15 to 20 damage turns with popping Snapdragon Scalers. And also it had the what's the Whirling Mist Blossom.
Yep,
which took a lot of people by surprise, because then they were like, used a lot of cards to block my previous attacks, and bam, this comes in, deals 2 damage or 3 damage if you're versing an Ira. Sometimes you can time it, because obviously you copy your opponent's ability. So if I was versing Ira, I would get that ability, and then it would pump my Whirling Mist Blossom. But yeah, ended up going 2-4, which is, to be honest, it's pretty respectable.
It's okay.
I had probably the best time I've ever had at a tournament playing that deck.
I think
just because of those huge, insane turns that I could do.
I think it goes to show that as well. It's, at certain tournaments, there definitely is scope, I think, to build something just kind of completely off the radar, something a bit different, and you can catch people off guard because they don't know what you're playing. They don't know sort of how you built the list and
yeah,
things
exactly.
Like that.
And when I was, going into when I thought I was going to 3-0 and start versing all the Kanos, I thought, great, I get to steal Kano's ability. I can pitch a blue, put in a Teklo core into play, something like that. There's a lot of these really tricky plays that you can do to really take people out by surprise. And having something like a Teklo core in general in that deck just meant that I can play out my whole turn twice, barely using any cards as resources. I mean, it was extremely red heavy. I think it ran something like 25 to 30 red cards. So it was really, red line to the core. But yeah, great experience. I don't think I've ever lost that many games in a row. But yeah, no, it's definitely, there's something there. There's something there.
So, if all of you out there want to give Shiyana a go, you managed to crack it, let us know.
Yeah, but let's move on to the real topic at hand for this thing, which is the Metagame Breakdown.
Yeah, because I saw the list, the most played deck at the tournament, so there were 54 players and there were 18 Iras, so that's like a full third of the field was Ira.
Yeah.
And
huge Ira representation.
And I think the next most played was Kano at about 9 or 10 or so, something like that. And so we've seen, I think Ira has been like fairly dominant on the local scene. So it hasn't been like crushing every tournament, like there have been Kanos coming through. But we were starting to wonder if the Kano decks would come back with a vengeance, because I think we'd noticed in some of our testing, and other people have alluded to that, Kano, once you get the hang of playing against Ira, it's actually very strong, particularly the more sort of control-based Iras. And when it came down to it, in the top 8, there were 5 Kano decks and 0 Iras. So I think there was, one Guardian...
One Guardian, one Rune Blade, one Warrior.
Yeah. So, and then it ended up being an all Kano final as well. So I think that represents a really interesting shift. So I think, like we've talked before in metagames, sometimes there's a bit of a tendency to sort of follow the decks that are winning. So because Ira had done so well in the past, you go to your local armory and 50% of the field plus is playing Ira, and then top tables it's people winning with Ira. And I think even I noticed just from chatting to friends and anecdotally that there's been a bit of a shift to the Kano deck starting to take over the armory events and starting to win more and more. And I think people have just sat down with Kano, like I mentioned, really figured out the Ira matchup and sort of thought to themselves, Ira as a deck, as constructed at the moment, the control builds, they do a very similar thing every turn. So they attack for 1 with Kodachi, they attack for 3 with the needle, and then they're going to throw an attack in for like 4 to 6 damage usually.
Yeah, 4 to 6 damage.
Or, you know, sometimes they'll attack once with Kodachi and then play a Command and Conquer for 7, that sort of thing. So the thing is, like, you kind of know what to expect from the Ira decks. And I think once you kind of have identified their lines of play, it gives you quite a lot of ability to play around it. So you're like, well, maybe I'll take the needle this turn, or maybe I can, like, take this damage. Or if I know they're going to be down to 1 resource this turn, then I can do this and that. And yeah, so I think what's really interesting to me is how this is going to, like, the ripple effect this is going to have on the metagame. Because by that I mean, the existence of Ira in such large numbers has really kind of shut out, I think, a number of the go wide aggro decks in the meta. Because of the power of things like Flick Flack, there were, I think, some decks, like certain versions of like Warrior, or maybe even like Aggro Ira or Aggro Ninja, that felt like they started to become unplayable. Not completely, like you can build them to be good, but like a lot of people were trying builds and they just weren't working out because first of all you'd struggle with Ira, and then your Wizard matchup wouldn't be that great anyway. But I think now that with Ira, I think a lot of players are going to look at these results and say 1/3 of the field, 0% conversion rate in the top 8. Like, something has to change with these Ira decks. Like, if you take the same Ira deck to the calling in 2 weeks' time, the writing's kind of on the wall, right? Like, you've seen there are a lot of good Ira players there as well. You know, it wasn't just the fact that like all the best players were on Wizard and, you know, the rest, like, there was no one good playing Ira sort of thing. That definitely wasn't the case. So I'm wondering if, like, 2 things. First of all, do the Ira decks adjust how they're playing it? You know, do they look and say, I can't play 8 defense reactions? Because 8 defense reactions are like a worst, like some of the red ones are like a bad cracked ball against Wizard, right? Like
that's absolutely true. You have these red sinks, red fates, red
flick
flacks, which against Wizard they're actually just like do nothing but pitch 1.
Yeah, and they're just really bad. So when, like, you know, close to 25% of your deck does nothing against one of like the best decks in the format, and now that more people are playing it, I'm wondering if we might see a shift away from those super defense heavy decks, and if they might tilt towards something slightly more aggressive in order to make their game better. Or start adding like something in, maybe more attack reactions to give the deck a bit more like unpredictability. So
exactly, because that's what we've seen. I mean, one of the kind of things that you see when you're playing Ira is that they're very consistent but very predictable. I mean, you attack for 1, attack for 2 or 3 with Needle, and then you do that big attack. And the rest of the cards, you just basically want to get as much efficiency as you can from blocking the opponent, and, you know, basically have access to those great 2-3 card hands. But yeah, it does, once you kind of play around it, it's, even though it's still hard to beat, it's insanely hard to beat with other decks. It does have that element of predictability. And I just wanted to also say, you know, you talked about the 5 Kanos that made top 8, but that Viserai, Bravo, and Warrior managed to overcome those Iris as well, which is quite interesting. I mean, first of all, you have Kale McCreath on Guardian, who kind of really built the deck to have a good game against Ira. You know, he played those emerging dominances, really pushing those crippling crushes above so he can get a consistent hit with those. And as a Guardian player, you have access to, I believe, in total, 10 blocks with equipment. You know, you have the 2 legendaries and 1 majestic equipment that can block for 2 than 1. So that's 9. And then if you need to, you can even play an Iron Rot legs. So that just can stop so many Kodachi attacks as well. And
it's an interesting thing because you say that, and that's a shared feature between Guardian, Runeblade, and Warrior.
Yeah, so all 3 of those decks have that exact same feature. All 3 of them have access to 10 blocks of equipment, which just means that you can consistently shut that second Kodachi down on your big turn, which means that you're stopping them getting their mask trigger. You know, you take 1, you block with equipment, you still have 4 cards in an arsenal, and they might hit you for 6 or 7 type thing, which you can, if you have a good hand, you can take that 7 and put pressure back.
I think as well for those decks, things like when you're setting up a huge turn, sometimes the IRA players can buy themselves time with something like Command and Conquer, and you can potentially just if your Skullcap is active, so if you're on lower life, these decks can potentially, particularly Warrior, which runs Refraction Bolters, you can actually block out a Command and Conquer for 7 with just your equipment. So you can say, like, whatever you throw at me, I'm going to keep a 5-card hand, including Arsenal, block your Command and Conquer for 7, or like you say, block your Kodachi, block whatever, and just, I can set up and do a turn that I know you can't block. And I think that is quite interesting that, decks that I alluded to that might struggle with Ira have actually started to work out what they can do to get around it.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is that not only do you have access to all those blocks of equipment, but you also can have a turn where you just use your whole hand or most of your hand to block up most of the damage from the Ira player and then drop a potion. And then all the kind of, they might have a decent defense reaction in arsenal, defense reaction in hand, and if you just don't put any pressure on them, then that become dead cards for that one turn. So then they're playing with like a 3-4 card hand on their turn, which is still quite a bit of damage, but you've just got a potion in play, so you can prepare for a massive turn. And I think these kind of like setup decks can push through, and one of the best examples of the setup decks is what Jason Chung was playing. Actually, I think he was really wanted to show people that you can beat Ira, and he played this very, very passive one-turn kill Runeblade deck that just stacked rune chants. He basically would get up to 30-40 rune chants and play a 9th blade, which gets to that consistent stage where you play it, one hit, an Ira, and that's the game over.
Yeah, so I think it's I think like the more, that's the cool thing. I think it shows the metagame is like still fairly healthy. Like the more dominant a deck starts to seem, people like that, the crosshairs go on that deck and they say like these are the ones that we want to figure out how to beat. Also, I just wanted to drop back to Guardian because I saw it popped up. I think if a couple of people were asking, why is Guardian running Sledgehammer? Sledge of Anvilheim. So that's the Guardian weapon that you can pitch for to attack for 6, which on paper seems very similar to Anothos, and I think we might have covered this before, but the reason this is quite good is for the Wizard matchup, where you're traditionally running Null Rune 4, and what that allows you to do is, if you're running Anothos without having Tectonic Plating as a resource sink, so Tectonic Plating you can pay 1 resource to create a Seismic Surge token. If you don't have that against Wizard, in order to attack for 6 with Anothos with 2 blues, you actually have to pitch 1 card to the Bravo ability, which costs 2 resources, and then you pitch your 2nd blue card to then attack with Anothos, and it leaves you with 1 resource floating. Whereas with Sledgehammer, you can simply pitch 6, attack for 4, and leave 2 resources up. And that's actually like very relevant especially over the course of a game. So it's just something like reasonably small that that someone like Karol and other players have figured out to make the Guardian game slightly better. And I think there's other things as well. Like I feel at this tournament we've also seen traditionally in Ira vs Kano, I think originally early on Ira players were playing Null Rune 4. So they're playing 4 pieces of Null Rune equipment and thinking, I can block things like Sonic Boom. So, a 2-cost, 3 damage, non-attack action. If it hits, you reveal the top card, and it costs X less, where X amount of damage it's dealt. So with Crucible of Aetherweave, the wizard weapon, being able to pump that up by 1, Null Rune 4 lets you completely block that out, similar to Lesson on Lava. But I think Ira players have caught on. They need to have, something, a little bit of unpredictability, a little bit of extra power.
Yeah, because the whole kind of decision making is in the wizard player's hand. If they have a terrible hand, they just take 1 from Kodachi and use their whole hand to block up all the damage. Yeah. And I feel like those scalers and things like Razor Reflex can basically give Ira some element of surprise, and that's what you really need, I feel. Yeah,
so basically, like Karol mentioned, so we've now seen Ira builds more play towards playing Null Rune 3 and then playing Snapdragon Scalers. So that way you can give something like your your Torrent of Tempo or your Enlightened Strike, at some point, as an attack reaction, you can give it a go again. So you can like try and keep your opponent guessing a little bit. It's not just, if I block this, their turn's over. So I think that's quite cool as well. But I'm not sure, as I say, I wasn't at the tournament, but I'm not sure if that's something that all the Ira players were playing or if they're still sticking with Nora and 4. But I think we'll definitely see a much greater shift towards that.
Yeah. And I feel like it does kind of create this uncertainty for the calling, because here in Auckland, we've seen Ira just dominate every kind of armory. And then as the Wizard players, we down in Wellington, capital of New Zealand, we hear that it's basically dominated by Wizards, which is, a completely different metagame that they have as well. And now both of these worlds are going to come together, and we've seen that all the Iras just, really underperformed.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting sort of time delay as well because I think we've definitely seen Kano start to do better and better at armories over the past even like 2 to 3 weeks. And I think when I say a time delay, it's because a deck like Wizard, we say this about all decks, but I think in particular a deck like that, you really get a benefit from playing more games on it. Like I know when I went back to Wizard after having not played it in a while, I was playing against Ira Control, and like I lost my first 4 or 5 games in a row, and I'm just like, what? Like, how do you win this? Like, they just attack, they keep stripping cards over and over again. There's nothing I can do. And then, speaking to a few Wizard players, a bit more practice, I started winning more and more and more games. And I think we might have seen that translate a little bit at Armory. So, like, players deciding to give Wizard a go, maybe at the first Armory or second Armory, they don't do that well, but they learn more and more, practice with their friends, and then they start to, like, win Armories, and then they show up at these tournaments, and they're just like, I know what I'm doing. So. And
I've seen some Wizards, even run things like the Red Fate Facine that kind of throw in a spanner in the work for Ira, or like Red Absorb in the Aether, which both of these cards just allow you to, at some point in the game, destroy the needle, which just really removes Ira's ability to put on pressure. Yeah, if going something like a Kadachi, not being able to needle, and then it's just basically really restrains the Ira player from being able to put on pressure.
Yeah, I do think that's an interesting development, because I definitely tried it out just to be a bit of a troll. So, these 4 power defense reactions. So, like Karol mentioned, it basically, if you kill their needle on turn 1 or turn 2, an already bad matchup just got a whole lot worse for them.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Doesn't help you much in the mirror, but hey, you can just pitch it away to a crucible of Aether Weave,
Yeah, so I guess time will tell, if that sort of keeps going as the game goes on. But I thought that was definitely an interesting development, and like it's one of those things that if people start to fear the Fateful scene, it actually kind of works in your favor anyway. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, basically I'm really interested to see if Ira stops, because if Ira control players start dropping defense reactions, then things like Warrior in particular, Warrior already, basically, I feel like it has quite a good game against most decks because people don't write defense reactions other than Ira. And then it kind of hits this wall against Ira and just really struggles to beat that. And to be honest, same with Wizard. So it's not very well positioned. But if Ira players start dropping defense reactions, maybe we'll see more of like Warriors and Brute. Brute has quite a decent game against Wizard. I feel like it's not as good as in Classic Constructed, but it does just tend to lose. Like, I've been there before. I've turned up to armories and I've played against people who've picked up the game a few weeks ago and they just completely destroy me on Brute, and I'm like, okay, well, this matchup sucks. But hopefully, I don't know, maybe that will create windows for decks like Brute, in particular Reiner. KO Control has seen a lot of play just because it can push through Ira with high rolls over the course of a game. But yeah, things like Kasai, I feel like has a real potential. I feel like that deck has a lot of potential. Unlike Dorinthia, I feel like Kasai can really pressure Wizard a lot more than classic Dorinthia can.
Yeah, because these decks that can put on pressure with a lot of go wide attacks. Maybe we'll see poor old Katsu make a bit of a comeback, even like, because that's another deck that it's just like, I play this, I lose to Ira, can't play it. Because I do think, like you mentioned as well, because decks like Ira, once they start to maybe cut a few defense reactions by necessity to go a bit more aggro, really starts to make them a little bit weaker against these, opens the door to these aggro decks. And it also allows the aggro decks that have to tune their list towards Ira to actually dedicate maybe a couple spots here and there towards Wizard. So there's like these really interesting ripple effects everywhere, and that before you were kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Like your deck has to do two completely different things in order to beat Ira and to beat Wizard, and now that the Ira decks might have to deal with the reality of these Wizard decks that are doing really well, adjust their builds, and what's going to be the outcome of that. Because like you mentioned, Kasai, which hasn't really seen any play. I don't think I've seen maybe one at Armory in Weeks. Maybe that's a deck with things like multiple hidden runs. It can actually just put a lot of pressure.
Yeah, you just go attack with Saber, and then finish off with a Coax, all backed up by a ton of defense reactions. So I feel like these decks can spit out a lot of damage, and I feel like that's how you beat Wizard. You just need to constantly pressure them. I feel like if you go on too much on defense, and it's something that we've seen with Guardian, with the whole Sledge of Anvilheim strategy, where you just kind of really sit back, try and put on pressure, try to attack them for 6 with holding cards up to save yourself from Kano ability or that instant speed burn. You're basically giving the Kano player all the decisions. You're giving them the control of the game. They can go, okay, sweet, block with 2, swing back at you with 2 cards, but at the same time, they don't feel threatened at all. They just picking the decision. They have the windows of opportunity to really make a big play.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because at this point, the calling's not that far away. I think it's, just over 2 weeks, or roughly 2 weeks, and I think that as much as we say like the meta is shifting or people might adjust, it's actually sometimes quite difficult to switch at short notice to a new deck. So, I mean, personally, I feel that there still will be a lot of Iras at the calling. And that's the issue. The tournament, the calling, I believe, is sold out. Like, it's got over, over 150 players, something like that. And it's an 11-round tournament. So
I think it's going to be the biggest Flesh and Blood tournament up to this day.
I think it is. I think it's the biggest tournament to date, which is really cool. And and that's kind of the thing as well. Like, if you tune your deck too much to beat Kano, and you lose to an Ira in round 2, that puts so much pressure on you for the rest of the day. And there might be players who've played Ira for like a month, and it's more about adjusting the internal build rather than switching to a different deck. So, but I do think it's good. I think it's good that I feel some changes have to be made to the Ira deck, and I'm not sure what those changes necessarily will be. But I think it'll be very, very interesting to see how sort of armories and maybe a few local tournaments play out over the next few weeks.
Yeah. And
how people adjust to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good point that you mentioned, that people probably, I still expect to see a lot of Ira. I expect to see a lot of Kano. I expect to see some Warriors. I think Warrior and, Dorinthia in particular, I think will most likely be the third most represented hero. Bravos and Brutes. And by Brutes, you have the Rhina players and the KO players. I really hope that there is some kind of, that there are classes or heroes that haven't seen much play that are going to kind of steal the show. But yeah, maybe some tech here and there in terms of the Ira and Kano players. I thought of building just a life gain Wizard deck that basically does the opposite of every other Wizard deck, and you just sit there with Sigils, Tomes, and Sun Kisses, and just gain a bunch of life, and go
set up
for
a combo sort of thing.
Go set up a combo, which I still feel it's very viable, and it's I feel like there's even in what I'm trying to say is, even in classes like Wizard and heroes like Ira, there's still so much room to maneuver.
Yeah, and like for people to have small bits of tech, even 1 or 2 card changes, like we always say, can like actually make a big difference and kind of swing matchups a bit. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting because also, you know, like we always say as well for very big tournaments, like you know, a lot of the top players will play their cards pretty close to their chest coming up to it. So, you know, the fact that we you know, might have seen some top players on certain decks at recent tournaments might not necessarily mean they'll play those at the calling. In fact, you know, I'd be very surprised if someone turned up with the exact list they're going to run at the calling 2 weeks out, because then they'll reveal it to everyone else.
Exactly.
So I think we're definitely in for a few surprises. But it'll just be, yeah, really interesting to see how the top 8 plays out. I'm hoping for at least 4 different decks in the top 8.
Yeah, so, okay, let's do predictions. What do you think? How is the top 8 going to be composed?
Ooh, well, I think, personally, I think there'll be at least 3 Kanos. So I think at least, like, maybe like 3 Kanos. 3 to 4. And I still honestly think there'll be 1 to 2 Iras in the top 8. I don't think it's... I think there's different ways you can play Ira. I think there's enough good Ira players out there that they'll find a way through the field. And then I think maybe 3 of, like, the other decks. So maybe something like one Guardian, 1 Brute, and 1 Warrior. Something along those lines. So Warrior could be like a Sai or thing. I mean, I feel like we're probably not going to see something like a Cavdane or a Data Doll at this point.
Well, imagine grinding someone out for 11 rounds.
11 rounds, yeah. You know what?
With Cavdane, you know, sitting there making them lose a life when you gain a life. Like,
yeah, you know, watch me look like an idiot in 3 weeks' time when Cavdane looks broken.
Aggro Cavdane!
Yeah. But I think that'd be my prediction. Like, based on at the moment, I think we'll see at least 3 Kano players. Yeah. 2 Iras, and then maybe 1/1, something like Bravo Warrior.
Aggro Cavdane, that could work.
Oh no. And obviously going in Guardian, you know, being the Guardian deck, so.
Hey, you never know. I've seen OTK Guardian lists out there.
Well, what about you? What do you reckon?
I have a prediction that I would have thought that, like, we're going to see a mirror of what happened in the Mighty Ape tournament when there's 5 Kanos. But I think because of the fatigue of this 11 rounds...
Yeah, that is true.
I feel like the Kano players are going to get burnt out at around 6-7 rounds. And I feel like they're going to drop off. I think we're going to see a big upset. We're still going to see like 3 Iras, maybe
0
2
Kano.
3 Iras. I reckon there's going to be more Iras than Kanos. I reckon there's going to be 3 Iras, 2 Kanos. I love Brutes, so maybe 3. No, that's not good. I mean, maybe like, I think only 1 Brute. I feel like Brutes just doesn't.
It's really got that inbuilt. It's got that inbuilt randomness that makes it like a little bit hard.
Yeah, over 11 rounds. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Probably, I reckon there's going to be some great Warrior players around New Zealand. So I think maybe 2. I'm going to say. So I'll say 3 Iras, 2 Kanos, so
5.
1 Dorinthia, 1 Kasai, and...
It's final spot. Brutal Guardian for your final spot.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll go with Shiyana. No. The last one I think is going to be something random.
Yeah, true. It could be something random. Like, my one hesitation with Guardian is I do think it's a deck that's still going to struggle a bit with Kano. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have enough experience on it against like Ira, for example, to see how that matchup is. But I mean, if they really figure out how to like totally beat Ira, then maybe that will be the last spot. But I think it suffers a little bit from that sort of predictability angle, in that in order to go all in with Guardian, you often have to like tap out most of your resources. And I think really experienced Kano players can find those windows in order to strip cards and then, you know, deal that decisive killing blow. But yeah, I think you're right. I think one wildcard deck that like we haven't seen like anywhere really so far. Yeah. Well, at least one of those will make top 8.
Maybe something like Benji. I don't know. I feel like I just don't know why, but I feel like Kasai has really well positioned for this tournament.
Well, the thing is, like, no one really knows how to play against Kasai, right? Like, I mean, you put me against Kasai, I'd be like, what?
Exactly, and that's why I think that, you know, some of these newer heroes, especially.
Well, I have heard Benji has a good game against Wizard.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that was probably a few weeks ago, so I don't know how relevant that is.
Kodachi, like a blue Rabble for 1 or something.
Yeah, or like a blue Soul Bead. Like,
yeah, blue Soul Bead.
So, yeah, we'll see. But basically, I think we both agree that like probably at least 50%, maybe just over, will be Ira and Kano.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see, you know, various other decks fill it out. You know, I feel like at least one Brute will probably make top 8. You know,
yeah, one Lucky Brute, you know, just rolling good on the
Exactly.
Scavskin. And I feel like that's something you do need to win Ira. You just have to get lucky as on the Scavskin.
What's that quote? Like, you know, you give a million monkeys and a million typewriters infinite time and they'll create the works of Shakespeare eventually. You know, like this. You know, if enough people are on Old Faithful Brute just rolling the dice, you know, someone will get there.
Yeah. I've tried it a couple of times and it punishes you so bad. Yeah.
But, yeah. So, I guess that pretty much brings us to the end of today's episode. We really just wanted to look at the evolving Blitz metagame here in Auckland, because we're so focused on, or New Zealand should I say, because we're so focused on Blitz in New Zealand that, you know, that's all we're playing really. There's not much Classic Constructed. I have spoken to a few friends, you know, playing over in like England and the States, or the UK and the States, and I'm really happy to see that some of the online armories there are getting sort of 15 to 20 people. You know, someone's told me that a few people are playing Data Doll now, now that I put out the challenge. So,
Classic.
Yeah, that's really cool as well. But, yeah, so, I mean, let us know your thoughts. Maybe drop us your top 8 predictions, what people think, or let us know what your dark horses are for the calling tournament coming up in a few weeks. Or even if you think we've totally missed something and there's, like, an obvious deck out there, it's yelling at us in the face, but we're missing it.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, well, thanks for listening, everyone. And, yeah, we'll come back next week, maybe with some more updates.
Yeah, and if you're playing at the calling, good luck.
All right, bye, everyone.
See ya.